Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello, and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. I am so glad to be back with you together again today. If you are new here, you may not know that I took a couple weeks off, kind of unplanned, but at the end of last year, I thought, you know what? I could push through this, or I could give myself some very much needed rest. And so I chose the latter. I'm very glad I did, even though it did mean that I had to leave you all abandoned for 2 weeks. Anyhow, today's kind of a fun episode. I am recording remotely for the very first time ever. I'm actually in the most beautiful little bed and breakfast in Temecula, California. It's called the Vine House. If anyone is looking for a lovely retreat, I highly recommend it. My husband and I are celebrating our 18th wedding anniversary. And when I say that number, I'm like, whoa, wait a second. If I've been married 18 years, I don't know. Like, it just makes me feel like, wow, like you must be getting up there. Actually, I got married pretty young. We're going to have my husband as the first male guest on the Special Needs Mom podcast today. You know, it's been a long time coming that I wanted him to be on this episode, and specifically to get a man's insight into special needs parenting as it relates to kind of who we are as women and wives and moms. Regardless of your marriage status, there is typically going to be a father involved in the parenting of your special needs child. Whether you are married to that father or not, I think that a lot of the information we go over in this episode will be applicable to you. So I haven't forgotten you single moms, but I did want to put that in there. So we are celebrating this special milestone. And so I thought it would be the perfect time to bring him on, as I've been wanting to have him as a guest. And before we get into that part of the episode, I wanted just to kind of wish y'all a happy new year and put a little vision for what I have in store for you this year. I honestly don't have the entire year mapped out as far as what we'll do on this podcast. However, I think in general, what I'm looking forward to is continuing the conversations that we've started and to drill deeper down into areas that I can tell are of most interest to special needs moms. I keep looking back at the statistics, and what I see in the statistics is that the episodes that center around worry and anxiety are the most popular. And so I think that tells me that as special needs moms, dealing with the worry, dealing with the anxiety is going to be something where instead of just doing a couple more episodes on it, I think I'm going to really kind of drill down and really support y'all in that area. And so that will be coming, as well as, of course, more interviews. And this is my announcement for if you want to come on the show, if you have a friend or somebody in the community that you think I would really love to hear them and their insight and their story really on the Special Needs Mom podcast, please send their name my way, send your name my way. It's totally cool to nominate yourself, and I would be honored to start that conversation with you. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome my husband, Dan Ryska, also known as Dan the Man, to the show.
Thank you, Kara. It's good to be here. I've been wondering when you're going to invite me on to your Special Needs Mom podcast.
You don't know how hard it was for me to hand the microphone over to you. I think it's funny because, having the having the control of the mic is something I'm used to having, and I'm not used to being in the same room with my guests and having to actually hand the microphone over to my husband, no less. Well, let's tell our story a little bit. Well, it started with you seeing me from across the room and thinking, that is the most beautiful goddess I've ever seen in my life. No, actually, that's how I wish it started. We started out as really good friends. And funny story is, I would see Dan in a campus Christian club that we were in. Campus Crusade was the name. It's now called Crew. And I would see him and I would just roll my eyes. I was like, oh gosh, that guy's so ugh. He's so boisterous. And he didn't notice me for the first, what did you say, year or so?
I believe the term you're looking for is charismatic. I was very charismatic in my faith. And I wouldn't say I didn't notice you, but there was a lot to see when we first went to college. But fortunately...
So you're saying like other people to see? Is that what you're saying here?
Just a lot to see. But it was ordained that she would go on the worst summer of her life with who would become my best friend, who then introduced us to each other our sophomore year.
And we won't go into all the details, but we were young. We were like 20, 21 when we first really became friends. And over the next couple of years, we clearly fell in love and decided to get married at the young age of 23. So like I said, yes, we've been married for 18 years, but we started really, really young. And I look back at that decision when we were 23 and I think, wow, I believe in faith and God's hand. But I also feel like we got a little bit lucky. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. We both had baggage coming into this marriage. A lot more baggage, I think, than we would have realized. But just through life and experiences and connections to different communities, we've been able to unpack that baggage and get to a place where we are able to, in a really, I don't want to say unique way, but I think it is unique for how we're able to grow, to be able to grow as a couple together and as parenting for very unique and special kids.
And it's funny because there's part of me that says, well, who are you to talk about marriage on this podcast? Because I think it is pretty unique that I would say, and I'm hoping you agree, that our marriage is actually one of the easiest parts of our life. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. And yeah, I agree.
And I think it was like, I don't know, maybe like a year ago that I had the realization that I'm not that easy of a person to be with. And so it made me realize, wow, like it must be you that is so gracious and wonderful to be married to. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I was there. You could be like, oh, hey, no. Okay. No, yeah. Okay. But we do want to, I guess, pull the curtain back a little bit on the real life and what it's really like. As you all know, you are all doing this as well. So we wanted to kind of highlight a couple things where, one, what works as far as I think I was reflecting in preparation for this podcast and kind of looking at how both Dan and I were college athletes. And I thought that, you know what, I think that if I look at the way that our marriage works is I see that both of us in general find what needs to be done and do it. I mean, it doesn't always go perfectly. I mean, we just had some car maintenance issues happening. We won't go into those details, but it's not perfect. However, in general, I can rely on Dan, and I hope vice versa, for him to jump in and kind of fill the gap as you would on a sports team. So what else do you see kind of from that analogy of really what works well as far as our partnership and the way we operate as a team?
I think it's playing off of each other's strengths in a lot of ways. And that's, using your analogy, using our strengths to kind of fill the gaps. And those are different. And some of them, I want to say, are kind of natural. But they're the role that we each play is built off of our strengths. And I say that we'll probably go here in this conversation, but I think what we do well is kind of I would say, the shoulder to shoulder work of life of parenting, where we're kind of together in the mission of parenting and homemaking and all those things. But I think where the challenge is to be intentional with this, but where I feel like this last year we did better with was the face-to-face coming together, staying connected and becoming more connected.
And I do think that is an area that I would say, yeah, we can grow as well. I think that actually presents itself as one of the challenges of special needs parenting is that there is so much to be done, whether it's in physical labor, in preparing medicines, hospital trips, doctor office trips, or whether it's the emotional labor of kind of being with the impact of our children, that it becomes very, very easy to really lean on the partnership teammate side and not the, I don't like using the word lover side. What else? Romantic partner? What do we say here?
Lover.
No, that's too creepy. Well, the side that is unique to being in a marriage versus just being in a friendship. I guess that's a very different and distinct part of being married, is having intimacy in a way that you don't with hopefully other people.
No, I think about, at least for me, it's easy to internalize the emotional trauma that we can experience on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day, emotional trauma from not just our special needs kid, but from our other kids who are responding to their special needs brother. And it's easy to internalize that and just, again, get into I almost want to say the soldier mentality, where it's like, okay, I need to do better. I need to, like, how can I fix this? But being willing to sit with your partner and say, this is hard. Like this is a hard season right now. I experienced this today, and that was really hard. But then I think there's been a couple times, a few times recently, where I had the insight to respond to something that you went through. I forget what it was. The list is long, but just to acknowledge to you the hardness and difficulty that must have been for you to go through that. And I think acknowledging my own feelings and pain and trauma, but learning to see my spouse's experience, pain and trauma, and acknowledging that as well. I think that there's a powerful thing there. I remember you appreciated me just kind of being with you in that.
Yeah, I do remember that. I think it was related to some of the food related issues that we've been having more recently, where we're coming across a lot more food stealing or hoarding, and just really, we can call it unexpected behaviors that happen to hit both Dan and I in really triggering ways. It just triggers us in a unique way than other behaviors do. So having to not carry that alone and just be able to have him carry that with me was really meaningful. So I want to kind of move into actually looking at what it's like to parent together during these really difficult seasons that which we just went through. So for new listeners, in the last 3 months, so starting about, I don't know if it's 3 months, August, September, October, December, we, in October, underwent what we call tumor termination 2. So essentially, Levi had another brain surgery to remove another tumor. And so it meant another hospitalization and really just an upheavaling, is that a word, of our life. And so we would call this a hard season, clearly. I can't remember, unfortunately, all the details, but I remember specifically I was in a time where I was doing all of the kind of planning, preparation, and scheduling of all the things that needed to happen to make this surgery happen. And what this meant was I was taking significant time off of my career, and I was focusing on this. And so not only I had the missing of stepping away from my career, but I also had to be with the emotional impact of scheduling all these surgeries. And then I think, if you listen to the episode about how it didn't go very well in many regards in terms of hours and hours on the phone, and really it shouldn't be that way to schedule a surgery, but that's a whole nother conversation. Anyhow, so I'm in this kind of season where not super thrilled about how it's going, really having a hard time with all of it. And I remember a distinct moment. I was in my closet, and I don't know what triggered the thoughts, but the thought that came to me was, don't turn on your spouse. And so this thought clearly must have been in defense of, I don't remember what I was exactly mad about, but I remember I was starting to pick and starting to kind of tear down Dan in my mind. Maybe he wasn't doing enough. Maybe I was upset and resentful that I was taking time off my career and he wasn't. I'm sorry, I can't remember the details, but it probably was a combination of all of it. And so I remember thinking, don't do it. Don't turn on your spouse. Really, it took a conscious effort to recognize that he was still on my team. And I think after that, I recognized, okay, I think I need to have a conversation with him and like let him into my world a little bit, because I think I recognize like, oh, he has no idea. He has no idea that any of this is happening until I tell him. And so I think you do remember the conversation. And so what do you remember about that conversation when I let you in to kind of what was going on for me?
I feel like we've had those conversations before, but I feel like in those conversations, I always kind of go into this internal like of guilt and like I've missed the mark on something, as if I should have. Well, I mean, most of the time you feel like you presume I should read your mind. Naturally. But I feel like ultimately in that conversation, I do remember feeling this. I'm not sure if sorrow was the right word, but just that feeling bad that I hadn't seen it, and you've had to go through all this. It's been an interesting season because for me, professionally, like this, there's been a huge growth for me, something I've been working for the last 5 years that was happening all during this time. And so I had a lot of focus at work on that. And
sorry, I wanted to steal the mic for a second. I do think, though, and you may not agree on this, I do think that there was a relief in being able to focus on the professional aspect of your life, because the other side of your life was so chaotic and out of control and kind of hitting on all the triggers that we have as humans. And so I do think that there perhaps was a coping for you of focusing on work that exacerbated me feeling alone in it. Do you think that was happening for you at all?
Oh, I can definitely say yes. I mean, whether it most like it was a subconscious thing, but it definitely there. I remember having these thoughts of, regardless of what happens with students at work, so much easier than whatever's happening at home or in the hospital. Like I can do this crazy student work thing, but home, that's a whole nother thing.
And the reason I wanted to point that out is because I think that as women and men, we process our emotions differently. We process life differently. We process having the children that we have differently. And I think it's probably pretty common for one of the spouses, maybe you have a role reversal where you are the working parent as the mom. And actually, I had come across a significant number where there's stay-at-home dads. And so I think this applies for either spouse and either gender. But I think that the temptation to focus on professional life is big, because I think that especially when we're confronted with unanswerable questions as it relates to our children and their diagnoses and their futures and all of that, that it feels so much more gratifying to be able to go to work and to, have wins and to see your impact into all these things. And so I think that is just something that I wanted to mention, to kind of be able to have you pay attention if that's happening and really just open a conversation about it.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking about conversations and gratitude I've had in my head regarding us being able to get to a place where you are working out of the house. Like you're not a stay-at-home mom, but you're a working mom from home, which we knew in the big picture we need to get to. We need to have that. However, the growth edge for me, looking into this new year, is the partnership that's so important. Because just because you are home, it doesn't mean you have a career that you're growing. And I think I forget that at times, that yes, you are home, yet you have a career, and the time parameters for you to be able to do that as a stay-at-home working mom is much less than I have as I leave the house in the morning and come home in the evening.
And I think that kind of leads me into something that essentially where we got to in the conversation a couple months ago when I recognized, wow, I need to let him in, is asking for help. So yes, I stay home, and I work from the home, working, obviously producing this podcast and the coaching work that I do. And it was a very strategic decision on our part to actually create that as my career, in the sense that we knew we needed to have the flexibility to be able to support Levi's appointments and therapies, etc. And this was it was the thing that I wanted to do with my life in terms of contribution, but also it allows me to have the flexibility that I need to have. However, I think, and even this is, we're on this nice trip together and kind of looking at the year ahead together. And I'm recognizing that it would be very easy for us to fall into the same, like, okay, you go to work and then by default, I pick up everything else. And what I find is I don't like that strategy. I don't like necessarily being the cleanup girl to kind of make it all happen. And so for us, what that looks like is communication. That I have to let him into my world, in the sense of like saying, hey, you happen to have some vacation days. Can you use your vacation day or PTO, whatever we want to call it, to take the day off to bring Levi to this appointment? And recognize that I don't necessarily have to be the one to carry it all alone. And so I want this conversation to apply to you, whether you work inside or outside the home, or whether your full-time work is caring for your children. And that's the case for many of you, that when you're home with your child, then that really is what's occupying all of your really energy. So recognize that it's equally as applicable to this conversation, regardless of income and career and all that kind of stuff. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think preaching to myself, being the person that works out of the house, that's what the idea that comes to mind is not hiding your home challenges, because especially depending upon what type of career you have, you can be very achievement oriented, goals oriented, have to get things done, deadlines, all those things. But to being willing to acknowledge the limitations that your special needs kid has on you, that you need to work within those boundaries. You need to bring your boss, your superiors, your support, your team into your world, and being okay that you're gonna have to take time off. Almost having that conversation with your direct report, whoever that might be, that hey, like this is my reality. These are some of the things I might have to do. As much as I can, I will plan those out and plan for those. But we're not necessarily asking for permission, but just kind of giving that this is where I am. I'm still going to do what I'm intending to do, but I'm going to have to also do this, which is, there's a vulnerability in that. For me, there's a lot of vulnerability. I'm like, today, January 1st was official new contract for a new promotion I just got that, like I said, I've been working for a long time. But even with that, I have to be willing to say I can't do everything. I have to be willing to not step away from the house and be all in and forget this important part of my life, but to be somebody who that's part of the work I do.
Well, what I hear in you saying that is really being fully responsible as a father for who you are it sounds like you're kind of looking more at the employee opportunity, but being responsible to recognize these are the facts of my life, in the sense of like, the fact is that you have this child that may have to, let's just use hospitalization, that may require me to step away from my work a couple times a year or for a long period of time or whatever the thing is, but recognize that who you are being about that is really kind of owning the impact and looking ahead and saying, how can I make this work for all of us? recognizing that like you can't make the thing go away. You can't necessarily stop the hospitalization, but that you can, again, like create that partnership even with your employer so that it works. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. It's not like there's not an impact and consequence for the needs that these children have. However, I think that a lot of times what we do is just pretend like it's not happening because we wish it wasn't happening. But that doesn't necessarily allow us to step into like the ownership, which it just allows a different relationship to the challenge. And usually it feels more empowering, and therefore people receive it a lot different than if you are just kind of in denial.
So empowering is the right word for it. And I think about the vulnerability that might keep me from saying to telling the people I work with about my life or what I'm doing. But once I bring people in, more often than not, people are very supportive of that role, of your role as a mother or a father, being a priority for you in the workplace. And so by being proactive about those things, it is empowering because you're inviting people in to support you. And I remember when we were in the hospital that I had this feeling that I really should get back to work. Because again, when I'm working towards these promotions and things like that, I had this feeling I had to get back to work, and everyone was like, no, like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you even thinking that?
Well, let's see. What else do we want to include in the Special Needs Mom podcast, husband edition? And I think, kind of want to go back to the idea of really just staying on the same team, because I want to go back to the conversation I kind of brought up a little bit ago about the temptation to look at your spouse as the problem. I think sometimes what happens, and I think what was happening for me, is that when we are confronted with such significant challenges as we are as special needs parents, that we scan our environment and we think, okay, how can I fix this? How can I make my life better? I think what happens a lot is we tend to focus on maybe the shortcomings or the failings or what our spouses are not doing. And we think that might be the problem. That if we change the spouse situation, as in maybe we got rid of them, and the reason I'm saying this is I hear this in the conversations I'm having with special needs moms, is that maybe if we got rid of the husband, it would actually be easier. In some cases, maybe it is. I'm not saying that that's not ever a true statement, but I think my theory is in most cases that our brains are desperately trying to make things better for us. And it does what we call a thought error in the business, a thought error, where it's like you recognize that you're thinking something, but it may not be true. So the idea that life would be easier without your spouse, that may not be true. And in my case, it certainly wouldn't be true. He's relieved. But I think we just kind of, it's really easy once we get on a negative track thought or negative track train, if you will, of what our spouses aren't doing or what they're missing, to really focus on that and have that be the loudest thing that you see and experience when you're with them, living with them, parenting with them, all of it. And so what happens is we get our experience of them is that like, it's all in this, like, they're not doing enough. They don't understand. They're not emotionally there for me. They may not also, this is a little side note. They may not parent your child exactly like you do. And I think what happens is that women think that they don't care, the dads don't care, or that they're incapable. And I want to say, I want you to check again on that. I want you to recognize that, my husband's a good example where he and I think balance each other out, where he'll let the kids be a little bit more risky or, I don't know, we could say dangerous than I would be. And I think that we're a good balance, but I love seeing his ability to let the kids go a little bit because I see that it balances my own desire to protect. And so I think what happens is women sometimes try to overprotect, especially with their special needs child, because obviously you're trying to keep this child safe. And then you look at how your spouse is doing it, in this case, your husband, and you think they're doing it wrong. And so I want to just kind of put these thoughts out there, recognize that if you're having a negative experience of your spouse, I would invite you to inventory the thoughts that you're thinking about them over and over again. My guess is it's going to be focus on what they're not doing, what they're missing, the problems that you're having with them, and that those are going to be the things that come up for you. If you're having a positive experience with your spouse, I want you to do the same thing and recognize that all the things that you come up with, those are the reasons that you're having a positive experience with your spouse. In either way, you can learn to grow and to kind of expand upon that and kind of recognize that if you're struggling with focusing on those negative things, then that's just an opportunity for you to kind of get clear on what you want and to see and to kind of test yourself on how you can change your experience with your spouse without requiring them to change anything about themselves.
As you're sharing that, which I think that those are great insights for both sides of things. I was brought back to our experience that this is all around, that the conversation of the journey with Levi into the hospital and stuff. I recognize that you were doing a lot. I didn't know all that you were doing, but I recognized it was a heavy time. So my response was to really focus on how can I create, how can I lift the load, if you will, of the things that I can more immediately do. And for one of those things is I know it's really important and meaningful for you to have the kitchen like clean and a good space in the morning when you get up. So I recall that I put more effort into that. And so I wasn't not doing, I actually was doing a lot more. I was very intentional with my actions to create the space so that the load you were carrying could be lighter for you. So you didn't have to have that to deal with. And so it's your partner may not be responding the way you'd want them to respond, but it's not to say that they aren't responding. And I think that's where the thought, the practice you talked about to reflect upon that is to be able to see, like they are helping, but there is more I need support on. So I think we still have to have that conversation. We still have to kind of let each other into our experiences, especially for which will likely be the mom who is shouldering the scheduling burden of all those things, to be able to ask for help, and for that husband to be willing to hear and respond and carry that together.
That's a good point. I think it brings me the concept of the 5 love languages up, because I think that clearly you were supporting me with acts of service and trying to really create a space for me, which, thank you, by the way, that was really nice. And funny enough, I didn't notice, not to discount what you did, but the reason I'm saying that is because I think probably what I needed at that time was something different. And I think had we been able to talk about it, and I should say, we did talk about it and we got there. However, I think being able to talk about it through all of the time will be, I think, the thing that allows you to kind of get through those bumps. And especially because, as you all know, you have seasons that come with special needs parenting. And if you go into a season already a little kind of wonky or weak in terms of this relationship, then all the harder to get through. I mean, I'm just looking at like the time of the recent hospitalization where, we're literally seeing each other for like 5 and 10 minutes as we're switching basically roles from hospital to home parent. And so it's just one of those things where, having a partner who you feel like you can rely on and who is kind of your team, I think can make special needs parenting better, right? I mean, I think it's one of those things where like if you have a good team in place, it can dramatically impact the experience. So we are, fans. We are fans of investing in this relationship and recognize that many of you are starting from a place where you didn't necessarily have, I think, like I said early in the episode, I feel a little bit like, oh gosh, who am I to talk about this? I feel like this is the easy part of my life, that kind of like we have, our heart is in other areas. And I know that's not the case for all special needs parents. Some of you have hard family lives in terms of the children that you parent, and you don't necessarily feel like you have what you want in your marriage. So I want you to listen, maybe even listen again to what we shared in this episode and see how you can apply it to creating the relationship that you do want with your spouse, giving it an opportunity. Recognize the filter that you might have on that is flavoring your experience of your spouse, and kind of even just remaking that commitment that you are going to commit personally to seeing who you can be in the marriage, into the relationship, or even if we're looking at into the relationship of co-parenting with someone that you're not any longer together with, of actually creating something that works for you. So any closing thoughts or comments?
Well, what was coming to my mind as you were doing that last thought is the importance of the internal work and focus and because that's the thing you can actually control. You can't control your special needs kid. You can't control your spouse as much as you want to. He's still going to leave the cabinet doors open for whatever reason. I can't get that and the potatoes out as well. However, by focusing on yourself, the transformation work that comes from there, the investment in that's where, for me, I've seen the biggest transformation into other relationships with Kara, with my own mom, the different things that I've gone through with my kids, that when I did the work on myself, which so much of this podcast and the work that you do, Kara, is about that, focusing on the internal work. And it's not being selfish, but it's dealing with the trauma and the hurt that you've gone through so that you can be the person that you need to be able to be the spouse that you need to be, that you want to be the mom that you want to be to your kids. So again, you can control who you are and what's going on inside. You can do that work. And so I just would encourage everyone to continue into that work, to have this year be a year where you make those decisions to do that, the hard work that it is to dig in, to go into that baggage. When I went through coaching a number of years back, we talked a lot about baggage and about unpacking those things and releasing some of that stuff. But that was the transformative work that got me to a place to be able to be more of the husband, be more of the father and the friend that I wanted to be. So continue doing the work on yourself, because that's probably the most important thing that you can do.
And really, like I think you said, it's really all we have control over, because we don't control any of the other things, like you putting those potatoes back once you take one out. It's an ongoing joke we have. Anytime Dan gets a potato out from the pantry, I can guarantee that all the things that were in his way to get to the potato will also be out. It's pretty funny. Like, it's to the point where I'm like, I just don't understand what's happening in his brain when he does this. Oh, well, so yeah, now you know, it's not all fun and games over here. We have potato issues. But thank you for being part of this conversation. I would love to hear what you took from it. what you might even add to it. Like what was missing from this conversation that you feel like you want to actually be a conversation in the future episodes of this podcast. And so we're going to wrap up there. Happy anniversary. I love you, honey. And here's to another 18 years.
Ditto.
One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.